you, Josh, for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, you need to make me host for me to be able to live stream.
Okay, I will do that now. Yeah. And Josh, will you make me a co-host? I'm not sure if that. Yeah, will you make me a co-host?
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome, folks. Thank you for spending your Sunday night with us.
It's night already?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to our virtual talk from the Jackson Hole Jewish community. We'll get started here in just about a minute. We're going to let some folks filter into the room. Please feel free to share your video if you'd like and say hello on the chat, and we'll get started here in a minute.
I don't know about that light. I don't know about that light. It's so clear. Nice.
Kevin, it's not letting me open up my video.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I just changed the settings and you should be able to start your video now. Sorry, that was my bad. All right.
No, but why is he named Kevin Krasner?
A related story.
Thank you. Thank you, Jed. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for spending some time with us on a Sunday evening. I'm Kevin Krasnow, one of the co-presidents of the Jackson Hole Jewish community, and we're honored that you're spending your Sunday evening with us tonight. A special thank you to those of us joining from Jackson, from Victor, from Driggs. We even have a large contingent from Pinedale tonight. So I want to welcome all our Pinedale folks tonight and folks zooming in from all over the country. Thank you for joining us. It's so wonderful to have people on from so many corners of Northwestern Wyoming and our extended communities. I also want to just spend a quick moment recognizing all the people who made this possible tonight, especially Mike Schur and Janet Bellis, two board members who really put in a lot of time and dedication to make this event possible. So I just want to extend a big thank you to Mike and Janet. All right, well, we've read about history in our textbooks. We've Googled topics on the internet all the time. We've even watched documentaries on the History Channel. But there are very few opportunities in our lives to actually sit in the same room, or Zoom room in this case, as someone who has survived and truly lived moments of history. Today, this evening, we'll have the unique experience and privilege of hearing firsthand from a woman who is both a witness to and, as a Holocaust survivor, a victim of history. I hope that you will listen, understand, and appreciate the message of hope, courage, and compassion that she will share with you this evening. It is my honor and privilege to introduce to you our special guest tonight, Mrs. Marion Blumenthal-Lazan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we can't wait to hear your talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kevin Krasnow, for your very meaningful and kind introduction. I thank you and Mike Schur as co-presidents of the Jackson Hole Jewish community for sponsoring my virtual visits this week in your beautiful area of Wyoming. I am particularly thank you for giving me the opportunity to reach out to many of your junior and senior high school students this coming Wednesday and Friday. I so wished that I could be with all of you in person, but since we still have this COVID in our midst, we will use this amazing Zoom technology to connect with one another. This evening, I'm with you to share my story. It is my childhood experiences during World War II in the concentration camps. I will tell you about our liberation and how we finally started our lives anew in our blessed United States of America. Mine is a story that Anne Frank might have told had she survived. This is also a story that conveys a message of perseverance, determination, faith, and above all, hope. After the presentation, I will be pleased to answer some of your questions. Life in the early 1930s in Germany was very much for my family, as it is here for most of you today. Never did we think that the anti-Semitic incidents there would ever lead to very much. My father was in a successful shoe business in a small town. My parents, 2 year older brother and I, lived comfortably with my grandparents above the shoe store. Life for Jews was made increasingly more difficult. And in 1935, the Nuremberg laws were formulated and enforced. The following are just some of the many restrictions imposed on the Jews in Germany. Jews were not allowed into theaters, into parks, or into swimming pools. All public schools were closed to Jewish children. Then there was an evening curfew for the Jews. Jews were only allowed to shop during specific hours of the day, and non-Jews were not allowed to shop in Jewish-owned stores. Non-Jews were just not allowed to associate with Jewish people. And then a big letter J for Jew was stamped on ID cards and on passports. These restrictions went on, and it was then that my parents decided to make arrangements to leave the country. My grandparents, who were in the late 70s and ill, refused to leave their home. They could not understand the urgency or the necessity of doing so. My grandparents passed away in 1938, just 11 days within each other. And soon thereafter, we received our necessary papers for our immigration to America. I was just 4 years old at that time. November 9th, 1938, Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night. It was the night of broken glass when the Nazis and their many followers smashed the windows and the storefronts of Jewish-owned stores. Jewish establishments, synagogues, and Jewish books were burned and destroyed. This was the beginning of a massive pogrom against the Jews in Germany, a massive verbal and physical assault against all German Jews. In reality, this was the beginning of the Holocaust, of the Shoah. On November 12th, following Kristallnacht, the German government actually fined the Jewish population for the damage caused that night. These imposed taxes were used to rearm Germany. The night of Kristallnacht, our apartment was ransacked. All valuables were thrown into a pillowcase and taken away. But worst of all was that they forcibly transported my father to concentration camp Buchenwald in Germany. All sorts of terrible stories were related to my mother, and we did not know if we would ever see my father again. He was released after 3 weeks only because our papers were in order for our immigration to America. And to think that just a few years prior, he had been awarded the Iron Cross for his military service in the German army of World War I. We were forced to sell both our home and our business for a fraction of its worth. And soon thereafter, in January of 1939, we left for Holland, from where we were to sail to the United States. And for almost 9 months, while awaiting our quota number from the American State Department, my parents were assigned to take care of some 125 children. These young children had been sent by their parents from various parts of Europe to escape from the Nazis. In December of that year, 1939, we were deported to the detention camp of Westerbork in Holland. to await our departure day to America. Camp Westerbork was constructed by the Dutch to accommodate Jews from various parts of Europe. In May of 1940, just 1 month before our planned departure date, the Germans invaded Holland and we were trapped. All of our belongings, which were about to be loaded on board ship, were burned and destroyed as the harbor of Rotterdam was bombed. Under Dutch control, Camp Westerbork was tolerable. My mother, father, brother, and I shared 2 small rooms. We all ate in a communal dining room, and at that time there was enough food for us so that we did not go hungry. Adults were assigned to various work duties. My father worked to repair shoes. My mother worked in the kitchen. We children had a makeshift education and lived a very dull, stagnant life. Several months later, when the Nazi SS took over the command of Westerbork, we became acquainted with the ever-present, terrifying 12-foot high barbed wire. And as thousands of Jews were rounded up, many taken from their hiding places, as was Anne Frank and her family, Camp Westerbork became overcrowded. And it was at that time that we had to share our small quarters with another family. And then the dreadful transports to the concentration and extermination camps in Eastern Europe began. This started in early 1942. And from then on, every Monday night, lists of those to be deported were posted, causing incredible anxiety, anguish, and fear. And then on Tuesday mornings, men, women, and little ones were marched to a nearby railroad platform from where they were transported. This area became known as Boulevard de Misère. It was an area of complete misery. At 11 o'clock on Tuesday mornings, the trains left for their destination. And of the total 120,000 men, women, and children that departed Westerbork, 102,000 were doomed never to return. In January of 1944, it was our turn to be shipped out. We children were actually glad for a change of environment. We were very naive and we welcomed the move. We were allowed to take 1 knapsack each, and whatever we could stuff into it, we were permitted to take. When we approached the railroad platform and we saw the cattle cars in which we were to travel, our fears began to mount. Adults suspected, and they somehow knew what was in store for us. I remember that it was a bitter cold, pitch black, rainy night when we arrived at our destination, concentration camp Bergen-Belsen in Germany. We were pulled and dragged out of the cattle cars and greeted by the German guards who were shouting at us and threatening us with their weapons and with the most vicious attack dogs by their sides. I was a very frightened 9-year-old, and to this day, I still feel a certain sense of fear whenever I see a German Shepherd. Bergen-Belsen was divided into various areas. It was sectioned off and surrounded by electrified barbed wire. Guards were always in strategically placed high guard towers, and in the evenings, as soon as it would turn dark, the bright searchlights from above would constantly sweep the campgrounds. We were placed in a section that was known as the Sternlager, or the Star Camp, named so because we had to continue wearing that yellow star which had been issued to us back in Holland. Men were on one side of the camp and the women on the other. And this did make it possible at times for families to get a glimpse of one another. We were placed in this particular section of the camp with the hope of being exchanged for German nationals in Palestine, who the British put under house arrest because they were citizens of an enemy country. Unfortunately, that hope never materialized for our family. 600 of us, 600 of our people were crammed into each of the crude, wooden, heatless barracks meant for 100 when originally built. There were triple-decker bunk beds with 2 people sharing each bunk. German winters were bitter cold and very long. We were given only one thin blanket per bunk and a straw-filled mattress. And this bunk was our only living quarters, and that for 2 people. I was very lucky that I was able to share a bunk with my mother, that my brother was able to share a bunk with our father. But can you imagine 2 adults, 2 strangers sharing a bunk under such horrendous conditions? A bunk that was no larger than the small cut bed that we're all so familiar with. I remember the first time seeing a wagon filled with what I thought was firewood for the one small oven that we had in our barrack. That oven, of course, was never used. I soon realized that what was in the wagon were dead, naked bodies thrown one on top of the other. Toilets and so-called washing facilities were at a great distance in the most primitive outhouses. Toilets were long wooden benches with holes cut into them, one next to the other. There was no privacy, there was no toilet paper, no soap, and hardly ever any water with which to wash. And in the almost year and a half that we were in Bergen-Belsen, never once were we able to brush our teeth. There were no trees, no flowers, nor did we ever see a blade of grass. And whenever it rained, we had to slush through the mud, adding even more misery to our already dismal existence. Every morning, every single morning, without fail, we were ordered to line up on a huge field. It was called an Appellplatz, 5 in a row as we were counted. We would have to stand there until each and every one of us was accounted for, often from early morning till late at night, without food, without water, no matter what the weather, without protective clothing. Frostbite was common. We would treat our affected toes and fingers with the warmth of our own urine. Our diet consisted of a slice of bread a day, some hot watery soup with grizzly meats and turnips and potato peels. Bread was later cut back and given to us just once a week, and only if our so-called quarters were neat and in order. Our birthday present to one another was that little piece of bread that we had saved up from the previous week. Once a month, we were marched to an area to shower, and there, under the watchful eyes of the guards, we were ordered to undress. We had heard about exterminations and gas chambers in other areas of Europe, and we therefore were never sure when the faucets were turned on as to what would come out, water or gas. The Nazis did their utmost to break us physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Unfortunately, they did succeed with many of our people. It was not uncommon for people who were no longer responsible for their actions to attempt escape, even though they knew that the chance to succeed was next to impossible. But they also felt that they had nothing more to lose. The failure of their attempts were obvious when we saw their lifeless bodies hanging electrocuted against the barbed wire. Malnutrition, dysentery, and the loss of the will to go on is what destroyed body and mind. Death was an everyday occurrence. The dark, crowded quarters often caused us to trip and fall over the dead. Bodies could not be taken away fast enough. We as children saw things that no one, no matter what the age, should ever have to see. I know, of course, that you've all heard, you've read, students have studied, you've seen movies, perhaps even through documentaries about the Shoah, about the Holocaust. But the constant foul odor, the filth, continuous horror and fear surrounded by death is indescribable. There is no way that this can be put accurately into words or pictures. Our bodies, hair, and clothes were infested with lice. We learned that there is a distinct difference between head lice and clothes lice. Squashing them between my thumbnails became my primary pastime. Much of my time was taken up with make-believe games, and one game, a game based on superstition, became very important to me. I decided that if I were to find 4 pebbles of about the same size and shape, that would mean that the 4 members of my family would all survive. My mother, my father, my brother, and I. It was a torturous, painful, very difficult game to play. What if I couldn't find the third or fourth pebble? Might that mean that 1 or 2 of my family members would not pull through? Nevertheless, this game gave me something to hold on to, some distant hope. After a number of months on our meager diets, our stomach shrunk so that the hunger was no longer painful. Teenagers and men suffered most from malnutrition and were the first to die. Those who lasted the longest were the women, and mothers in particular. It was their strong will to keep their children alive that kept them going. And my mother was one of those remarkable ladies. There is no doubt in my mind that it was my mother's inner strength and fortitude that finally saw us through. One day, my mother was able to smuggle some potatoes and some salt from the kitchen where she worked, and somehow managed to cook some soup in secret. This was done on our bunk. I was on the bunk with her, trying to hide and shield what she was doing. Soup was simmering, just about finished, when the German guards entered our barrack for surprise inspection. In our rush to hide that setup, the boiling soup spilled on my leg. We had been taught self-discipline and self-control the hard way. For if I had cried out, it certainly would have cost us our lives. This happened in the spring of 1945. I was just 10 years old. The population in Camp Bergen-Belsen were dying off rapidly, but not nearly fast enough to satisfy the Nazis. Several weeks later, it was decided to send 3 trainloads of our people to Eastern Europe towards the extermination camps and the gas chambers. We did not know that Auschwitz, with its gas chambers, had already been liberated. My family was among the 2,500 on the last of these 3 trains. It was April of 1945. Russian army was closing in from the northeast, and the British and the Americans from the west. Under normal conditions, this train ride from Bergen-Belsen to whatever area of Eastern Europe they were going to send us would have taken no more than 10 hours. But because the Germans tried to evade the Allies, we were en route for 2 long weeks without food, without water, without medical supplies, without sanitary facilities. That meant no toilets. Whenever the train came to a stop, those who were able and those who were strong enough were permitted to get out and take a drink from a nearby stream or dig up roots to eat. My mother remembered taking some sort of a pot and collecting water from the locomotive, and who knows what else that pot was used for. The need for water was almost more important than food because of the severe dehydration due to the dysentery and the high fever due to the typhus. Let me briefly explain typhus. It is a highly contagious, deadly disease that's caused from filth and spread by lice. At the same time, while the train was at a standstill, the newly dead were taken off and buried along the tracks. In addition, our train was subject to frequent air attacks by the Allies. It is truly remarkable how any one of us was able to survive under such horrendous conditions. In fact, 500 of our people, that is 1 out of every 5, died en route or shortly thereafter. My burnt leg was severely infected, and it was impossible to keep the wound clean or lice-free. In late April, after 14 days of this surreal and horrifying journey, the German guards stormed frantically through the train, seeking civilian clothing so that they would not be recognized by the Allies. And we knew then that the war was coming to an end. It was the Russian army that liberated our train and led us to a nearby farm village in eastern Germany. Most of the inhabitants had fled, and we took over their homes. Kitchens were stocked with ample food. It was rich and good, actually much too good for our starved bodies. We could not tolerate that unfamiliar nourishment. And at that time, at the age of 10 and a half, I weighed 16 kilos, or as we know it here, 35 pounds. and my mother weighed a mere 70 pounds. The Russians, in a crude way, tried to help us the best that they could. I was brought to a nearby clinic for medical attention. My leg was in very bad condition, and I was close to losing it. Fortunately, it was decided to treat the wound, and I was very lucky that my leg responded to medication and it gradually healed. As I regained my strength, I also relearned to walk. And in the interim, our heads were shaved because that was the only way that we could rid ourselves of head lice. Although we were all weak, ill, and thoroughly exhausted, I vividly remember the spring of 1945. The weather was beautiful, sunny and bright. Trees and grass were lush and green. Flowers were in bloom. Birds were singing. It was a wonderful, exciting feeling to be free at long last. We were all ill with typhus, but my father had to die from it 6 weeks after our liberation. And this after 6.5 years of mental torment and physical abuse. My 12-year-old brother, Albert, actually helped bury our father. When I talk about those years, it is as though I'm relating a nightmare, a very bad dream. I separate myself from it ever having happened to me, and that is how I deal with it. It is a wonderful story of how we gradually recuperated and were sent back to Holland to start our lives anew. My brother and I were eventually placed in a children's home, in a youth aliyah home, in to prepare ourselves to live in British mandated Palestine, and we know today, of course, as Israel. Most of the children in this home survived alone, without their parents. I felt like a total misfit. I needed to learn how to resettle into a normal society. Had no training for that. Here I was, by this time 11 years old. I had never been in a store, had no idea what money was all about, had almost no table manners. It was like learning to live all over again. It was in this home that we became reacquainted with life in its normal state. Meals served us were delicious and nourishing, and you can imagine that just about anything and everything tasted good to us. And though our surrogate parents provided a very strict environment, much love and care were given us. I began my first formal education at that time at the age of 11 and a half. We were taught the secular subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic, in a Montessori school where we progressed at our own pace. The Dutch language in which we were taught was all new to us. We also received a thorough education in Hebrew and in religious studies. The British, who were governing Palestine in the 1940s, had issued what was known as the White Paper, restricting the number of Jews permitted into the land. And they were intercepting many of the refugee ships and interning the survivors on the island of Cyprus, and in some cases, turning the ships back to Europe. In November of 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine between Arabs and Jews, which in May of 1948 led to the establishment of the State of Israel. In 1947, just 1 year prior to Israel becoming a state, our illegal voyage from Holland to Palestine was planned, and danger once again loomed over us. And because parents at that time were not permitted to accompany their children, my mother managed to make arrangements for a family of 3 to emigrate to the United States. And thanks to the Holland America line, we were able to use the tickets which had been purchased 10 years earlier. We arrived in Hoboken, New Jersey, April 23rd, 1948, by coincidence, exactly 3 years to the day of our liberation. 76 years ago, this past Friday, was our liberation from the Nazis. The Hayas, the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society, found a home for us in Peoria, Illinois. I had never heard of Illinois, definitely not Peoria. And there, at the age of 13, I once again started life anew in a strange land and again learning a new language, my third new language in less than 3 years. First Dutch, then Hebrew, and now English. And because of my inability to speak English, I, at the age of 13, was placed in the fourth grade with 9-year-olds. Although both my brother and I worked long hours after school to help our mom pay bills, I nevertheless found time. I actually made time to take extra courses during the year, attend summer school, and by working very hard in my studies, I was able to be graduated from Peoria Central High School 5 years later at age 18, ranking 8th in a class of 267 students. It was 2 months after high school graduation that I was married to Nathaniel Lazan, who I had met at the age of 16, Erev Pesach, Yom Kippur in the synagogue. And God willing, we will be celebrating our 68th wedding anniversary this coming August. Nathaniel, come this way and say hello to the nice Wyoming people.
Hi, everybody.
That's Nathaniel. Amazing, amazing individual. He was an Air Force pilot and very disciplined and conscientious. Amazing. I am grateful. I am very grateful that I survived healthy in body, mind, and spirit, and that together with my husband, I'm able to perpetuate my heritage with a wonderful family. We have 3 grown children, all 3 are happily married, and they've given us 9 beautiful grandchildren and 7 magnificent great grandchildren. Amazing, amazing. And in March of 1996, my memoir, Four Perfect Pebbles, co-authored by Lila Pearl, was published by Green Willow Division of HarperCollins. It's now in its 34th printing in hardback. And then HarperCollins decided to do a 20th anniversary edition with this cover, which I'm not fond of. It's that barbed wire that over and over again bothers me, but they were in charge and that was it. It's available from Scholastic Book Club since the late 90s, has been translated into German, into Dutch. Yad Vashem in Jerusalem published it in Hebrew. This is when I was 7. And if you all like, you may read it in Japanese. I don't know. This way. Okay. Maybe there's someone in your community who can do just that. But above all, I am so grateful that the story is in book form so that it can be passed on to future generations. And I'm thrilled that a documentary has been made entitled Marion's Triumph with the actress Deborah Messing as the narrator. So you see that despite all the terrible things that happened to me as a child, my life today is full and rewarding. Although I've spoken to upward of 1.5 million students and adults over these past 20 some years, it still has not become easy. However, I do realize the importance of sharing that period of our history with you all, simply because in a few short years, we will not be here any longer to give a first-hand account. Today's generation, today's young people, is the very last generation that will hear these stories firsthand. And I therefore in particularly ask them to please share my story or any of the Holocaust stories that they read and hear about. Share them with their friends, share them with your relatives. And someday these young people should share them with their children. And yes, even with their grandchildren. When we're not here any longer, it is today's generation that will have to bear witness. As difficult as it is, the horror of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, must be taught, must be studied, and kept alive. Only then can we guard it from ever happening again. This is the very yellow star that I was forced to wear. It says Jude, which in German means Jew. It was just another way to denigrate us, to isolate us, and to set us apart from the rest of society. This, of course, represents the Star of David, a beautiful, meaningful Jewish symbol. But the Nazis made it so very ugly. Each of us, each and every one of us must do everything in our power to prevent such hatred, such destruction, and such terror from reoccurring. And we can begin by having love, respect, and tolerance towards one another, regardless of the religious belief, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of the national origin. This respect towards one another must begin in our homes, around the kitchen table, dining room table, wherever we gather as a family. We, the adults, must pass it on in our places of business, the students in their classrooms, halls of their schools, communities, towns, cities, and only if there's respect and tolerance towards one another in the countries can we expect to have peace in the world. We must begin with our children. Let us treat people as individuals. Let us look for similarities and respect the differences. Let us build bridges and reach out towards one another. And we must be true to ourselves and not blindly follow a leader without thinking ahead and searching our hearts and our minds as to what the consequences might be. When I speak in schools, I tell the students that it's not cool to follow just anyone's lead without first checking to see what his or her true intentions are. Please, please, let us all remember these messages and live by them. We are all aware, or should be, that 6 million Jewish people were murdered during the Holocaust of the Second World War. Your magnificent, beautiful state of Wyoming has a population of approximately 600,000. Can you possibly imagine 10 times the population of Wyoming wiped out? The 6 million also represent 1/3 of the entire pre-World War II Jewish population. Among them were 1.5 million children. You also need to know, and I'm sure you do, that 5 million non-Jews lost their lives. And among them were the righteous Gentiles, as we refer to them, very special people, non-Jews who jeopardized their lives to save Jewish families. They would hide them in the attics. They would hide them in the basements. Farmers would hide them out in the barns. They were hidden in convents. And when these good people were caught doing what they felt was the right thing to do, they also were deported to concentration camps and in many cases lost their lives. And that brings me to another message. We must never generalize and judge an entire group by the actions of some within that group. These are all universal messages, messages that each and every one of us is familiar with to varying degrees, but need to be reminded of over and over again. And this certainly was a good opportunity to do so. These messages are the lessons learned from that dark period of our history and certainly apply to today's world situation and definitely to our own individual lives. By listening, I hope that our young people prevent our past from becoming their future. I now would like to share something with you about an extraordinary lady, my mother. This was my mother, which way? On her 104th birthday. Mom's passed away a few years ago, 6 weeks short of 105. An amazing, amazing, amazing lady, wise and beautiful. Mom demanded 2 things of my brother and me when we first came to America. Number 1, learn English, learn it quickly. Number 2, work as hard as you can in school and at work in order to succeed. She was 40, Mom was 40 years old when we came to America. Knew no English, learned to read, write, and speak a magnificent English. She was remarkable and a fabulous, wonderful, dear mother-in-law to Nathaniel. And he was an outstanding son-in-law to my mom. So we were so grateful that there was such a beautiful, wonderful connection with one another. My brother, Albert, dealt with this altogether differently than I did. He did not talk about it as freely as you heard it from me this evening. Was happily married, lived in California. He passed away 3.5 years ago. But even though he was married, refused to bring children into this world, had a very difficult time with organized religion. All of that made me very sad. But I did not fault Albert. We have to remember he was 2 years older than I am, was with my father in the men's section, and I am convinced that he saw and experienced things that I did not. God puts us on this earth. Gives us a beautiful mind. It is this mind that allows us to choose right from wrong, good from evil. Therefore, men did this to one another. But did he have to make it so bitterly cold when we were standing out there on a Pell all day? I have a direct line. I asked loads of questions. Don't get too many answers, but that's okay. Faith I will always have. After all, here I am, 3 children, 9 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren from whom generations will be forthcoming. He made sure that enough of us survived so that we will always be here. I am proud of my faith, as I'm certain you all are proud of your faith and of your heritage. But please, please, let us all remember to respect the right of others to their belief. Be kind and good and respectful and tolerant and compassionate towards one another. That is the basis for peace. Had there been respect and tolerance towards one another some 70, 80 years ago, I would not be here this evening to share that dark period of our history with you. 9/11 would not have occurred. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, North Korea, all these countries that are in such turmoil would be peaceful countries for its people. Be kind and good and respectful towards one another, please. There is very little that we can do against the negativity in our world, but how we treat, behave, and reach out towards one another, that is entirely up to us. Did I ever find my 4 pebbles is a frequently asked question. I always found my 4 pebbles. I made it my business to find them. I cheated all the time. When I found them, I put them in a safe place. Next time I would search for them, and I couldn't find the 3rd one or that 4th one. Well, I knew exactly where to go and pick them up. Maybe that was cheating, but it was my game, and guess who made the rules? You need to know that I was only about 9 or 10 years old when things were at its absolute worst. We had nothing to occupy our time with constructively. No paper, no pencils, no books, certainly no games. So I was lucky at such an imaginative mind. And my imaginative games were always based on a positive attitude. I would search for a piece of glass or a piece of a mirror, whatever I could find on the dirt ground in Bergen-Belsen. And when the sun would shine, and that didn't happen nearly often enough in that part of Germany, known for bad weather and cloudy skies, but I merely knew that that sun would always come out. And when it did, that little piece of glass would cast a reflection onto the ground. And that little wiggly reflection, it became my pet. As long as the sun would shine, I would have my pet, and my pet would never, ever die. I would also imagine that one day I once again would have my 3 Bs. And these 3 Bs represent our everyday comforts and necessities that we all take so much for granted. First B represented a bed. I knew that someday I once again would have my very own bed with a real mattress, clean sheets, and enough blankets to keep me warm. Second B represented a bath, warm water, soap, clean towel, and with that would come toothpaste and toothbrush, of course. And the 3rd B was bread. I knew that someday I once again would have enough bread so that I would never again go hungry. These imaginary games, if you will, they were my survival techniques. They were my survival skills. Do you know that we all have survival techniques and skills within us? When the need arises, we just have to search for them, find them, and be sure that we put them to work. No one is spared adversity. No one is spared hardship. We all have to overcome obstacles at one time or another, but with perseverance, with determination, with faith, and above all hope, one can overcome just about anything and everything. Above all, never, ever give up hope. It is not so much what happens to a person, it's how we deal with the situation that makes the difference. Nathaniel is from New York. He went to Bradley University in Peoria, lucky me. He went home on vacations, and way back then in the 1950s, long distance telephone calls were very expensive. There were no computers, there was no emails, there was no texting, but there was a 3-cent stamp. And with this 3-cent stamp, we would write to one another every single day. Major problem. In Nathaniel's letter to me, he would add 5 words that he asked me to define and put into a sentence. That's a lot of nerve with all I had to do. But I knew he meant to help me with my English, and I guess it did work. So thank you, Nathaniel.
It was my pleasure, Marianne.
I, on the other hand, would write my letters in rough draft with a dictionary by my side. And only when I was satisfied with the way the letter was written would I dare mail it to him. Talking about a dictionary. My father always carried a little chunky German English dictionary with him, and he would study the vocabulary in secret whenever possible, always with the hope that someday he would reach America. When we came to the United States back in 1948 and approached New York Harbor, we were told the night before that if we wanted to see the Statue of Liberty, we needed to be on deck bright and early the next morning. Well, you can be sure that each and every one of us was on deck to greet and be greeted by that magnificent symbol of freedom, the freedom that had been denied us for so many years. And when that tall figure of that longed-for symbol appeared, I became too choked up to talk. So many emotions seized me at once: joy and gratitude, bitterness for the cruelties we and so many others had suffered, and deep, deep sadness that Papa, my father, could not share this moment with us. He would never know that we had reached America at last. And to this day, when we crossed the Verrazano Bridge, okay, maybe Wyoming needs an explanation. Verrazano Bridge is a long bridge that connects the borough of Staten Island with that of Brooklyn. And when we reach a certain point on that bridge, I will always crane my neck to see the Statue of Liberty. It is a most magnificent, beautiful, meaningful sight. Those of you who are listening in, if you haven't come visited the Statue of Liberty as yet, your very next opportunity, do so. It's outstanding. And of course, hugely meaningful. We returned to Germany on various occasions. And the very first time that we returned was in 1995. It was the 50th anniversary of our liberation. And we visited my father's grave. And the reason my father and about 60 others have a private resting place in that farm village where we were liberated was because they died after some of the chaos had subsided. Those who died early on were all buried in mass graves. We also went to Bergen-Belsen, and Bergen-Belsen looks nothing the way I remembered it. Had been burned down under the direction of President Eisenhower, who was then the commander of the Allied forces, because the conditions of the camp would have created tremendous health hazards for that entire region of Germany. So today, other than the newly built documentation exhibition centers, Bergen-Belsen looks like a park. Green grass, shrubs, trees, not bad looking at all, except for the mounds everywhere. Mounds with flags that read, "Here lie 1,000, here lie 2,500. These are the mass graves of our people. We also returned to my former hometown of Hoya near Hanover, and they were greeted by public officials who over and over again apologized for what happened to us back then. And there was a young non-Jewish couple born after the war, Heike and Hans Huth, who took us to the Jewish cemetery, which was in terrible disarray, had not been cared for since 1938. And they took us to our family plot. And there, among the toppled over stones, was a brand new shiny granite footstone with the inscription: Zur Erinnerung an die zerstörte Grabstelle der Familie Blumenthal, Hoja 1894 bis 1938. In memory of the desecrated plot of the Blumenthal family, Hoya 1894 to 1938, placed there by this non-Jewish young couple, unbeknownst to us, a most beautiful, generous, kind gesture. Never thought that I would refer to non-Jewish Germans in such glowing terms. And it's people like these that renew one's faith in humanity and have become dear, dear friends of ours. And then we returned back in 2010 because a brand new public high school in my former hometown was named in my honor. So now we have the Mariam Blumenthal Oberschule in Hoya, tremendous celebration, and very courageous for this little town to redress what happened so many years ago in their midst. And the night before the celebration, we commemorated the night of broken glass on the site where our synagogue once stood. Difficult trips, yes, but no regrets having returned. And talking about Germany, you need to know that they're doing everything possible to continually remind their people as to what happened during the Second World War. It is mandatory for the subject to be taught in the schools. And we had the opportunity to visit the parliament in Berlin, and there were murals, huge murals, depicting the night of broken glass. And then a number of years ago, they came up with something else called ein Stolperstein, a stumbling block. You don't really stumble over it. It's a metal plaque deeply embedded in the sidewalk in front of the home where the person once lived and never returned. And on that plaque is engraved, if you will, his or her name, date of birth, where, when, and how he or she died. It's remarkable that they continually come up with something new every so often to remind their people. And that certainly has to be commended. I'll open it up to a few questions. Mr. Klasnow, Kevin, please. If there are any, maybe they're not. I have plenty more to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an amazing story and what an important message you've shared with us. At this point, we want to open it up for questions. If you have a question for Ms. Blumenthal-Lazan, please type it in the chat. I'll also allow folks to unmute themselves here if you'd like to ask a question. Other questions in our audience?
I have plenty more to share. Do I still speak those languages very often, particularly by the students? Ik spreek een klein beetje Hollands. I speak a little bit of Dutch. Anneme de Berret Ivrit Ketzat. I speak some Hebrew. Ich spreche ein sehr gutes Deutsch. I speak an excellent German, and I do speak some English.
You speak Hebrew. Do we have a family there?
Huh?
You have family?
Yeah. Okay. Nathaniel wants to. That's right, Nathaniel. We have our youngest set with their 3 children and 2 grandchildren in Israel. So we sort of come full circle.
2 great-grandchildren.
Oh, 2 great-grandchildren, of course. They know that. Okay. Okay. Questions, anyone?
So I assume you've been to Israel, Marion. This is Mike.
Oh, that's Mike. Where are you, Mike?
Right here.
Hello. Hi. Finally, Mike. So good to see you. Okay.
So I assume you've been to Israel to visit the grandchildren.
Numerous times, or maybe 20 sometimes and then some. Yes. I can't hear you.
Oh, and tell us about your experience going to Israel after trying to go 40 years ago and now being able to go.
Yeah, well, I like to say that with our Michael and his wife Rachel and their 3 children and now the grandchildren, we've come full circle. Even though we did not go, there was a time when we thought we wanted to make Aliyah and emigrate to Israel, but we didn't. So we're here, and it was a very exciting, wonderful, wonderful, outstanding feeling to be on the land of Israel, Medinat Yisrael, for sure. And we're very proud of our children, because Israel needs young people, intelligent people, to keep the country going, for sure. And may they just have a peaceful existence there. That's all. They're trying so hard. And we certainly hope and pray for a peaceful years ahead for all the citizens there and succeeding generations. So
Thank you, Marion. We've got one question that came in the chat here from Stan Steiner. He says your message is powerful. How often are you speaking in schools or public events? You mentioned that you've spoken to 1.5 million individuals. How have you accomplished that?
I've spoken to her 2,000 times.
Oh, Nathania's keeping track of this. I've spoken over 2,000 times in various school situations, churches and libraries, and from 5th grade on up, it just works. And for instance, I spoke to 5th graders a number of years ago, and now they're in high school. They are understanding it on a much more mature level. And there's no way that they can comprehend everything as a 5th and a 10-year-old. So they listen to it over and over again, and so it is. And it is a very, very gratifying experience. And I'm always so grateful that I'm given the opportunity. And this coming week on Wednesday and Friday, I will address the junior high school and high school students in your area of Wyoming. So Mike and Kevin, I thank you so much. And of course, the Jewish community for giving me that platform and for giving me the opportunity. Very, very important that it is shared now while there is still time.
Absolutely. And, we have so much gratitude that you're able and willing to spend time with our community, not just tonight. I don't know if you caught what she said, but she's also talking to the high school on Wednesday, and she's going to talk to the middle school on Friday. So we thank you so much. And we have schools from Pinedale and from Driggs. We're also going to join
more
these
the
talks
better.
as well.
The more
Yeah,
the better. I'm
definitely.
often asked about a tattoo. Do I have a tattoo on my arm? I do not. That was done in Auschwitz only, just to torment our people, to dehumanize them for no other reason. And to think that Germany at that time was one of the most cultured nations in the world. And these men and women would go home at night to their own families as though they had a 9-to-5 job. Incomprehensible. Can't understand it. But that was a mentality that we'll never understand, for sure.
We've got a question that came into me, but I don't think anyone else is seeing this question, and it's quite interesting. It's from the folks down at the Pinedale Library. Thanks for posting this question. What do you tell people who deny that the Holocaust happened?
What do I tell them? It's lack of education, for sure. And I wish I could address them. That there is, I'm an often asked, but I fault the media for giving these Holocaust deniers way too much publicity. If there's no publicity about them, there'll be no one to listen to them, and that would be the end. So as far as children denying it, this is what they hear at home. So it's just something that is lack of education, I'm certain. And that's why we're running as fast as we can, as long as we're able. Nathaniel and I, this would never ever work without Nathaniel. Talking, because he, as I had mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were all on board already, he is my computer guy for sure. Talking about technology. Please, all of us, particularly our young people, use this technology for good only. Do not disparage others. Do not intimidate others. Do not embarrass your friends. Be kind and good and respectful towards one another, please. Okay, more questions.
We
So
have a
folks, please-
question here.
Hello,
Oh,
young
Thanks,
lady.
thanks, Jeff.
Go ahead.
Hi.
I'm Ravi, and I'm 9 years old. And my question is, did you have anything, and if you did, what is it, that you like kept with you the whole time? I guess.
Can you, I didn't hear the question.
Did you have anything that you kept with you the whole time?
Anything that I kept with me the whole time. You know, haven't shared that in a long time. I had a little mezuzah. I still have it. For some reason, that one, it's black and whatnot. It's just a tiny, insignificant looking, but I know it's a mezuzah, and that must have been given to me back in Westerbork, and it's been with me that whole time. So that I have still with me. And then, of course, this ugly star. My mother had such foresight to keep that, and the documents. Without documentation, that book would have never been published. So she kept so many documents. Was a tremendously wise lady. And she was 37 years old when she was widowed. Deathly sick children. She herself was sick with typhus. No money, no home, no country, not knowing what the future would bring. But she kept those papers with her, and this ugly star that I just kept these things. I have one that says Yod, which is in Dutch. When we were in Holland, we had to wear the yellow star, which said Jew in Dutch. So I have that one as well. And tremendous foresight, amazing, remarkable lady. Why did I tell you all this? I don't know. I don't know. But
Go ahead.
oh yeah, oh no, that's right. What is your name, young lady? Oh, she's precious. Where is she? I don't see her now. Hi.
My
That's
name
Revi.
yeah.
Go ahead, Rev.
My name is Revi.
Levy,
Revi.
spelled?
Revi.
Oh, Revi. Lovely. It's like Revital, right?
What's your phone?
Reviva.
Viva. That's the Viva is spring, right?
Yes.
Right. So I just want to mention, pertaining to the book, if anyone is willing to order books, email me the names. I will inscribe personalized book plates and send a bookmark and the personalized plates to you. So if you are interested, you could do that. So if I had been with you in person, we would have made altogether different arrangements. You would have had books and I would have inscribed and right then and there. But this is the next best thing for sure. September 11th, 2001. None of us will ever be allowed to forget that date as long as we live. At that time, Nathaniel and I were in Florida visiting children and grandchildren. And because all planes were grounded, we chose to drive home. And as we approached New York and crossed the Verrazano Bridge that I mentioned earlier, amidst the smoking ruins of the Twin Towers, we could see the Statue of Liberty, holding high the torch of freedom. It is that flame of freedom that the terrorists sought to destroy, but they could not, and they never will, because we will take good care of our freedom. We will safeguard our freedom. We will not and must not take our freedom for granted. Let us all, each and every one of us, redouble our efforts to be kind and good towards one another. And with that, I wish each and every one of you, your children, grandchildren, and all succeeding generations, a healthy, happy, productive future in a world of love and peace. Thank you. Okay, I now would
Wow.
like to, may I share a song with you? Are you there?
Yeah, I will get
Eric?
this.
Okay.
I will get this queued up here. We also did have a couple more questions that came in.
Okay,
Chat.
let's do that first. That's fine.
You want to do that first? Okay, great. So let me pull that back up. So we have 3 new questions that came in here. The first is, are you concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism?
What do you think? You bet I am. It is a shanda, it's a disgrace, and again, lack of education. I'm convinced, lack of education. And we must do everything in our power to combat that negativity towards our people or any group of people. Now it's the Asians and there's this and that. There's no reason for that. We didn't hurt anyone. Asians who live here didn't cause what we all are confronted with now. It's a sick mentality. And I maybe you have some idea what can we do about it. I don't know. I just think it's lack of education for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think, frankly, talks like this one are part of the solution. And we thank you for doing it. And we thank everyone for being here tonight. Please spread the word. We have another question here from Nora, who says, it's interesting that broken glass became beautiful after being ominous. Do you still think of that when you see broken glass or refractions of light? And do you remember how the stones felt between your fingers?
And what was the last part of the question? Do I remember what?
Do you remember how the stones felt between your fingers?
The stones? Oh,
The pebbles. The pebbles. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Look, I'll tell you a secret. They were not always perfect, like impossible, but it didn't matter. It worked for me. Looking for these stones or whatever I could find that were like force, it worked for me. And I'm often asked whether I still have them. I do not, but I have loads and loads of stones, big stones, small stones from Germany, from elsewhere, all with lovely messages, hope, love, perseverance, determination, faith, all these wonderful attributes that most of us have within us, and we should really cherish and keep them going. All these attributes are very important to keep our lives in a positive direction, for sure. And what was the first part of the question? I don't know.
First part of the question was about broken glass. How you started with the description of.
This is interesting. When we went back to Germany the first time, remember, Nathaniel? The very last evening we had a communal dinner, and we were presented by the municipality or whatever down there with a crystal vase. And we all looked at it, and we all were thinking the same thing. Why would they want to present us with crystal? I mean, it's just another reminder of what happened. But it was put to them. That question was put to the those in charge, and they said it has nothing to do with the night of broken glass. It was just something very pretty and something beautiful, and they thought that this would make us feel, pleased and what?
Okay.
Yeah, make us feel good. Thank you. Okay, so and I see glass. Kristallnacht, I was way too young to actually witness that. I was only 4 years old. So I really personally don't remember that. But my mother did. Oh my, does she remember that? And such a hurt. And my poor father, he suffered so much. He was a wonderful husband, a wonderful provider, wonderful father, and he was stripped of all his dignity. And they suffered, my parents suffered terribly. And much more. I was always with my mother, and that's probably why I'm so free to talk about it, because I was always protected by her. My brother had a much more difficult time, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, I do like to share a song with you. I won't sing. I promise I won't sing. It's a title song of a musical, Four Perfect Pebbles. It's written by John Holt from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and sung by an 11-year-old girl. Raviva, how old are you? Okay.
9.
9. Okay. Did she listen to my story? Or not completely? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
It's not by 11-year-old girl.
huh? Oh, okay. What was it now? Talk about what?
The song.
Oh, the song. Okay. My mind goes to the next step. The song is sung by an 11-year-old girl by the name of Lyric. Listen to the lyrics, watch the lyrics on the screen. You'll find them very meaningful. Okay, Kevin, please.
made of granite, some of sand, found in this dark and desolate land. Four perfect pebbles in my hand. Mother comforts Albert and me. Father shields us from misery. No parent's love can ever erase this sad and forgotten lonely place. Four perfect pebbles do I see, one for each member of my family. I hold them tight, I will not cry. All will live, no one will die. If I should lose my precious stones, my secret hiding place will reveal more perfect pebbles far beneath these barracks made of wood and steel. Four perfect pebbles do I see, Mother, Father, Albert, and me. I count them over one by one. I fall fast asleep. My work is done.
Okay. That's nice. Thank you. Can't hear me. Thank you so very much, all of you, for being with us this evening and taking the time to be with us. And of course, to Kevin and to Mike. And is it Josh? Is that correct? Yes. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity. And I hope maybe next year I can be with you. We can both be with you in person. And I certainly hope so that I meet you all. And please consider yourself hugged. And my very
Who is
best to each and every
Who
one
is
of
this
you.
with Kevin?
Huh?
Who is with Kevin here?
Who's with Kevin?
Yeah.
This is
Oh,
this is
oh.
this is Talia. You want to say hi?
Hello,
What is your name?
Talia.
Talia? You're Talia. We have a Dahlia. You're Talia. Thank you. Were you able to hear? Were you with us? Most of the time. Good. Thank you.
What
Thank
grade
you.
is she in?
How old are you?
I'm 10.
You're 10. Okay. See, that's how students identify. When I certainly share my age at various stages of the presentation, and they so much identify because somewhere along the way they were my age.
Yeah, I mean, it was stark to hear your story and to hear that you were 35 pounds when you were her age. That was just really striking for me. And I Mrs. Blumenthal-Lozano, I just want to thank you again. What a powerful story and critically important message, especially in these times. We're so fortunate that you've chosen to share your story and time with us tonight. Thank you so much. I, for one, will always remember your story and message. I'll share it with my kids and with my students and my community. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight.
Thank you so much. I wish all of you, the students, a remaining wonderful, successful school year, and Shavua Tov to each and every one of you who are listening in, and have a wonderful week. And just please, all of you stay healthy and well. Thank you.
Thank you again. On behalf of the Jackson Hole Jewish community, we want to thank all the participants for coming tonight and listening to this story. Please share the word. Mrs. Blumenthal-Lozano is going to be talking to the middle school and the high school later this week. And there's opportunities for other schools to join. If you're interested, please get in touch with the Jewish community. Thank you so much again. Everyone, have a peaceful evening.
We see lots on this chat box. I mean, I don't do this stuff. But what do you want with
Can
them?
they send that to us?
Can you send what's in the chat box to us? I don't know.
Yes, I'll save the chat box for you, and I'll send you
You
the
send
chat.
that? Oh, it's amazing stuff. Perfect.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. We hope you have a good evening.
Bye-bye, Talia. Goodbye, Reed. Take care.
Thank you.